Namaste and welcome to the UPSC News Analysis for the 15th of May, 2025. In this deep dive, we're going to unpack the crucial current affairs, break down the fundamental concepts behind them, and really pinpoint exactly why they matter for your UPSC mains examination.
That's right.
We've got quite a packed agenda today. We're looking at India-Pakistan tensions, Operation Sindoor, a new Chief Justice of India, border issues, migration, even some political rallies, reservation policy.
And China's renaming tactics again.
Exactly. And even a huge tragedy, bird flu, and some exciting science news on 2D metals. So, yeah, lots to cover.
Indeed. Today's news gives us a really compelling snapshot of Bharat's strategic, political, and socioeconomic canvas. And for those preparing for UPSC, understanding the why behind the what is, well, just as vital as knowing the events themselves.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. Let's begin with the situation that's been really prominent, these renewed tensions with Pakistan and Operation Sindoor. To get a grip on this, maybe we should quickly recall the line of control, the Lock-C, dividing Jammu and Kashmir, and that 2003 ceasefire agreement. That was supposed to quieten things down, wasn't it?
Supposed to, yes, along the Lock-C and the international border. But, for years, despite that ceasefire, cross-border terrorism has just been a persistent challenge. And now you have these outfits like TRF, the Resistance Front.
Yes.
Believed to be, a facade for established terror groups. It adds this layer of complexity, almost like a shadow play, giving deniability.
Right, plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Which brings us, unfortunately, to the trigger for Operation Sindoor, that awful attack in Pahalgam on May 7th, 26 civilians killed.
The devastating attack. And Bharat's response, it was quite decisive. Airstrikes targeting Muridke in Pakistan.
Muridke, the Lashkar-e-Taiba hub.
Exactly. And what's interesting, as you mentioned, is the reported use of Turkish drones and precision-guided munitions. That possibly signals, a step up in Bharat's capability for these kinds of targeted responses.
And then on May 13th, PM Mochi's statement, he called the halt in operations a pause, specifically not a ceasefire.
Yes, very clear language.
Reiterating zero tolerance for terrorism, and he referenced the 2016 surgical strikes in Balakot in 2019. It feels like a very firm strategic message.
It certainly does. The mention of the surgical strike doctrine again, which really gained prominence after 2016, is noteworthy. It suggests this willingness, maybe even a policy, to undertake cross-border counterterrorism actions when needed.
And the draft national security strategy, that's also leaning towards being more proactive.
That's the indication, yes. Perhaps even, an anticipatory approach to security threats. It makes you think about the evolving calculus of Bharat's strategic responses.
And in terms of government actions, we've also seen the UAPA used to designate groups like TRF as terrorist organizations.
Correct. That's the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. It gives the legal basis.
And the DGMO often comes up in these situations, the Directorate General of Military Operations. What's their specific role here?
The DGMO is pivotal. It's the key operational arm within the Indian Army. They plan and orchestrate these cross-border military actions. And crucially, they handle the communications about the ceasefire, the hotline talks with Pakistan's military. Any major move across the border is their direct responsibility. They're the main interface.
Okay, so for our UPSC aspirants listening, what are the key takeaways here for the mains exam? This seems like a really complex situation.
It absolutely is. First, the enduring challenge, cross-border terrorism, these proxy groups, that's central. Then there's always the shadow of nuclear blackmail from Pakistan, which inevitably influences the scope of conventional military options for Bharat.
Right, it limits things.
It does. Then, managing public sentiment, countering misinformation during these times, that's a critical governance task. Politically, these events, they tend to fuel nationalistic feelings, can reshape domestic politics. Strategically, Operation Sindoor might be seen as demonstrating Bharat's readiness for, maybe, multi-layered retaliation.
And
Ethically, yes. The potential for civilian casualties, the principle of proportionality in any response, these are always vital considerations. And diplomatically, Bharat has the job of explaining its actions, its rationale, to the world.
So, looking ahead, what could be the path forward? It seems very delicate.
A multi-pronged approach is really needed. Diplomatic engagement is absolutely key, talking to global players, making sure Bharat's perspective is understood. Continued defense modernization, especially under Atmanirbhar Bharat, focusing on things like drones, cybersecurity, that's vital.
Okay.
Strengthening intelligence coordination to hopefully preempt future attacks, preparing for cyber and information warfare, and long-term fostering trust, engaging with the local people in Jammu and Kashmir, that remains crucial for stability.
And just quickly, for prelims, some key facts to lock in.
Yes. Remember TRF's links to Lashkar-e-Taiba, Muridke as Leti's headquarters. DGMO talks are the military channel. The Turkish drones point to specific capabilities, and Pahalgam was the trigger site.
Got it. Okay, let's switch gears now to a significant development in our judiciary. Justice B.R. Gavai, appointed as the new Chief Justice of India. Could you give us some quick context on the CJI's role and the Supreme Court itself?
Sure. The Chief Justice of India, the CJI, heads Bharat's entire judicial system and, of course, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the final word on interpreting our Constitution, the apex court. Appointments involve the collegium system, that's the body of senior judges recommending appointments and transfers. And remember, Supreme Court judges retire at 65, which leads to these varied, sometimes quite short tenures for CJIs.
Right. And Article 124 deals with the appointments.
Correct. Article 124 of the Constitution.
So on May 15th, Justice Gavai took office as the 51st CJI, succeeding Justice Chandrashit. But his tenure is relatively brief, only until November 23rd this year.
That's right, a short tenure.
And there's another significant aspect to his background.
Indeed. Justice Gavai's appointment is historically significant. He's from the Dalit community, making him only the second Dalit CJI in Bharat's history. And he's known for past judgments focusing on civil liberties, social justice, upholding constitutional principles.
Now, the government does have a role in these appointments. Can you explain that a bit?
Yes. The formal appointment is by the president based on the Memorandum of Procedure, or MOP. This typically follows the principle of seniority among Supreme Court judges. The collegium, though, plays that crucial role in recommending the names for appointment, not just for CJI, but other judges too.
And there have been attempts at reform, like the NJJC.
Right, the National Judicial Appointments Commission Act back in 2014. That was an attempt to change the system, give the executive more say, but the Supreme Court struck it down in 2015, citing judicial independence. However, there are ongoing efforts, discussions at least, about increasing representation for marginalized communities in the judiciary.
So for UPSC aspirants, what are the key issues to think about here? For mains.
Several important points. The impact of these short CJI tenures, can they really push through long-term reforms? That's a big question. Then the collegiate system itself, the ongoing debate about its transparency, its accountability, is it too opaque?
The judges appointing judges criticism.
Exactly. Also, the underrepresentation of marginalized groups in the higher judiciary, that's a social justice concern. And of course, the huge issue of judicial backlogs, which every CJI faces.
Well, on the positive side.
Well, Justice Gavai's appointment has huge symbolic value for social empowerment. It also reinforces that established norm of seniority. But it still raises that question. Short tenures mean continuity, maybe, but do they allow for fundamental reform? It's a debate.
So what could be the way forward to address some of these challenges?
Well, reforming the appointment process is often discussed, finding a balance between transparency, accountability, and that crucial judicial independence. Maybe strengthening institutional memory in the CJI's office could help bridge the gaps left by short tenures. Continued focus on digitization e-courts, AI is vital for tackling backlogs. And concerted efforts, diversity drives, to bring more representation at all levels. Plus, improving infrastructure through things like the Judicial Infrastructure Mission.
And for prelims on this, quick pointers.
Focus on Article 124. Justice Gavai as the 51st CJI, second Dalit CJR, the fate of NJAC, the collegium's basic composition, and the fact that CJI tenure is tied to the retirement age, 65.
Okay. Next up, let's look at the border again, specifically the interaction between the BSF and Pakistan Rangers after the recent tensions. There was an exchange at Attari Wagah. Could you remind us about these forces and the significance of Attari Wagah?
Sure. The BSF, Border Security Force, is Bharat's main force guarding our borders with Pakistan and Bangladesh. Pakistan Rangers are their counterparts across the India-Pakistan border. Attari Wagah isn't just that famous ceremonial crossing. It's also a key point for communication, for flag meetings between the forces. It's both symbolic and practical.
And a flag meeting is basically a formal chat between the commanders on the ground.
Essentially, yes. They meet to sort out local issues, maybe de-escalate tensions, or coordinate something specific on the border. So this exchange on May 14th was the first official contact since Operation Sindoor and the Pahalgam attack. That makes it notable even with tensions so high.
But interestingly, reports said no sweets were exchanged this time.
Right. That usually happens on festivals or special occasions. Its absence clearly signals the strained relationship, the lack of trust right now.
But But they did reportedly reaffirm commitment to the 2003 ceasefire.
Yes, and that's a nuanced signal. No pleasantries showing the tension, but reaffirming the ceasefire suggests maybe a shared interest in just preventing things from spiraling further, keeping some level of stability on the border. It's a fragile balance.
What government initiatives are relevant here, besides the ceasefire itself?
Well, the 2003 ceasefire agreement is the bedrock. The DGMO talks are that higher-level military channel. We've also seen many people-to-people initiatives suspended. And of course, FARET's smart fencing project is ongoing, using tech to improve border security.
For mains aspirants, what are the implications of this seemingly small interaction?
It highlights the persistent trust deficit, definitely. It shows how proxy terror networks can undermine the spirit of the ceasefire. Also, sometimes these flag meetings happen, but there's limited follow-up, which reduces their effectiveness. You often see mixed signals, military actions here, diplomatic reaffirmations there.
Right.
But even symbolic exchanges can have a strategic effect, maybe easing local tensions at border posts. Politically, they might offer a tiny window for back-channel talks, perhaps. Psychologically, it might reassure border civilians slightly, showing an intent to avoid direct conflict. Diplomatically, reaffirming the ceasefire sends a message of restraint, despite recent actions.
Looking forward, how could things be improved along the border? What steps?
Well, maybe institutionalizing regular ceasefire reviews led by the DGMOs could help monitor things better, address violations. More transparency, perhaps through joint patrolling in some areas, or tech sharing could reduce miscalculations. Strengthening those crisis hotlines is always crucial for quick de-escalation. Maybe a clearer mechanism to track and penalize ceasefire violations, perhaps with neutral oversight. That could build accountability. And long-term, perhaps exploring low-risk, confidence-building things, cultural exchanges, sports might slowly help.
And for prelims on BSF Rangers.
Key things. Atari Wada's role. The ceasefire year, 2003. BSF's jurisdiction. The purpose of flag meetings. And the basic idea of smart fencing.
Okay. Let's shift focus now to a domestic issue, but one with international links. Assam's pushback policy regarding Bangladeshi migrants. Can you explain what pushback means here and why it's such a sensitive topic in Assam?
Right. Illegal immigration is a really long-standing, very contentious issue in Assam, given its long border with Bangladesh. Pushback basically means forcibly returning undocumented migrants right at the border, but without going through formal deportation procedures or legal due process.
So summary removal.
Pretty much. And the Assam-Bangladesh border is long and, in places, quite porous, making it prone to these unauthorized crossings. This has fueled a lot of socio-political sensitivity in Assam for decades.
And there are reports the Assam government has resumed these operations. What's the situation?
Yes, reports suggest over 400 undocumented migrants have been pushed back since March 2025. This has caused some diplomatic unease with Bangladesh. They've voiced concerns about receiving people without proper notification or process. The timing likely connects to those long-held fears in Assam about demographic change due to migration and the general anti-immigrant sentiment that exists there.
What government initiatives have tried to tackle this wider issue in Assam over the years?
There have been several major ones. The National Register of Citizens, the NRC, was a huge exercise to identify legitimate Indian citizens in Assam.
Right, that was very common.
Highly controversial. Then you have the Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA, from 2019, the Assam Accord back in 1985, the Foreigners Tribunals set up to rule on citizenship cases, and of course ongoing border fencing and surveillance projects. It's a complex mix.
So for the mains exam, what are the critical angles on this pushback policy?
Well, first, human rights concerns. Summary deportations without due process raise serious questions. Second, the potential damage to India-Bangladesh relations, which are generally quite good. Third, the impact on the people pushed back, displacement, identity crises, loss of livelihood. Fourth, the risk of fueling communal polarization within Assam. Fifth, potential violations of international norms on refugee protection. Security-wise, it might reduce pressure locally, but could it provoke other actions? Socially, it can definitely fuel xenophobia. And legally, huge questions about due process and fundamental rights.
What might be a more constructive way forward?
A more sustainable path probably involves talking with Bangladesh to set up a formal, agreed-upon framework for returns, maybe with international oversight. Improving the NRC process, its accuracy, its transparency is also crucial. Maybe developing rehabilitation policies for those found to be genuine migrants who've been there a long time. Investing in better border tech, AI, biometrics, and generally taking a more humanitarian approach that respects international conventions.
And prelims bits on this.
Know the definition of pushback. Assam Accord year, 1985. CAA cutoff date, December 31st, 2014, when the final NRC list came out, and roughly the length of the India-Bangladesh border.
Okay. Now, let's turn to some political developments. We saw Congress party rallies focusing on Donald Trump's old claim about Kashmir mediation. Can you remind us of that?
Sure. The Kashmir issue, obviously a long dispute. Farhat's stand has always been clear. It's bilateral, no third-party mediation needed. Back in 2019, then President Trump claimed PM Modi had asked him to mediate. Farhat flatly denied this immediately. It caused a bit of a diplomatic stir at the time.
Right. And now, on May 14th, Congress held these Jai Hind rallies. What was their main point?
They were basically accusing PM Modi of, perhaps implicitly, allowing foreign involvement in Kashmir by citing Trump's old claim, especially in the current context with Operation Sindoor. They demanded more transparency from the government on its Kashmir policy and called for a parliamentary debate.
And the BJP's response?
They dismissed it as politically motivated, calling it anti-national posturing, and argued that national security shouldn't be politicized like this.
What has been the government's consistent stance and actions on third-party involvement in Kashmir?
Very consistent and firm. Kashmir is bilateral, only between India and Pakistan, no outside mediation. This is repeated constantly at international forums. The abrogation of Article 370 in 2019 was also framed as an internal matter reinforcing this. Farhat uses both formal diplomacy, track 1, and informal back channels, track 2, with Pakistan, and the MEA always rebuts any foreign suggestions of mediation.
So for Maines, when we look at the politicization of such a sensitive issue, what are the key things to consider?
It's complex. Politicizing national security can potentially harm Farhat's diplomatic credibility if the world perceives mixed messages. The role of media manipulation, misinformation becomes critical. There's always that tension between public transparency and national interest strategic needs. Such controversies can raise doubts internationally about Farhat's strategic autonomy. Domestically, it usually deepens partisan divides. And it can affect public confidence in how these sensitive matters are handled.
What could be a more, let's say, responsible approach in political discourse on these issues?
Well, ideally, a stronger bipartisan consensus on core national security issues would project unity. Maybe more use of parliamentary oversight, like closed-door briefings for MPs on sensitive operations. Media responsibility and fact-checking claims is vital. Proactive strategic communication from the MEA helps manage narratives. And perhaps just the general norm of restraint in political rhetoric when discussing ongoing operations or very sensitive foreign policy.
And for prelims related to this?
Key points. Farhat's stand against third-party mediation. Trump's remark date, around July 2019. Article 370 abrogation date, August 5, 2019. And a basic idea of track 2 diplomacy, unofficial talks.
Right. Let's move now to social policy. Odisha has approved reservation for SEBC's socially and educationally backward classes in higher education. Can you give us the basics on reservation policy in Bharat?
Sure. Reservation is a form of affirmative action rooted in the Constitution Articles 15.4 and 16.4. It aims to ensure representation for historically disadvantaged groups like SCs, STs, and OBCs in education, jobs, legislatures. A crucial aspect is the 50% cap on total reservations, set by the Supreme Court in the Indrasani case back in 1992. The idea was to balance reservation with the principle of equality.
Okay. And now Odisha has approved 11.25% for SEBC students in higher education. How does this fit in?
This 11.25% is in addition to existing reservations in Odisha. It follows recommendations from the State Backward Class Commission. But, importantly, this immediately raises potential legal challenges because it could breach that 50% ceiling set by the Supreme Court. Exceeding the cap usually requires showing exceptional circumstances backed by solid, quantifiable data.
What are the relevant government bodies and legal precedents here?
The Odisha State Commission for Backward Classes is key, especially after the 102nd Constitutional Amendment gave state commissions more say in identifying SEBCs for state lists. Centrally, there's the 27% OBC reservation, and the EWS quoted 10% for economically weaker sections brought in by the 103rd Amendment. Key court cases, Indrasani, 1992, establishing the 50% cap, and more recently, the Maratha quota case, 2021, where the Supreme Court struck down Maharashtra's attempt to exceed 50% without adequate data.
So for the mains exam, what are the main points to analyze in Odisha's decision?
The biggest one is the challenge to the 50% cap and the legal justification needed. The absolute need for robust, quantifiable data to back any quota expansion is paramount. It also reignites the debate about merit versus equity in reservation policies. Then there are practical issues, like potential overlaps or differences between central and state SCBC lists.
Right.
The potential social justice impact, increased representation, is a key positive goal. But legal uncertainty, likely court challenges, are significant drawbacks. And politically, such moves often lead to mobilization based on caste.
So what steps could help navigate these complex reservation issues?
Well, many argue for a comprehensive caste census to get that empirical data needed for informed policy. Ensuring judicial scrutiny of state decisions is vital for constitutional validity. Harmonizing central and state SEBC lists could reduce confusion. Looking beyond quotas to other affirmative action scholarships, coaching is also important. And periodic review of reservation policies to see if they're still relevant and effective.
And for prelims on this Odisha SEBC reservation?
No SEBC full form. Odisha's decision date, May 2025. The reservation cap case name and year, Indrasani, 1992. EWS quota details, 103rd Amendment, 10%. And who identifies SEBCs at the state level after the 102nd Amendment, state commissions.
Okay, let's turn now to another recurring issue with China, the renaming of places in Arunachal Pradesh. Basic context on China's claim.
Right. Arunachal Pradesh, our northeastern state. China claims it as part of what it calls South Tibet, or Xiangnan. This practice of renaming places on maps to assert a claim is often termed cartographic aggression. It continues despite a 2005 agreement to settle border issues without disrupting settled populations.
And this isn't the first time they've done this renaming.
Not at all. They released lists in 2017, 2021, 2023. This latest one, on May 14, 2025, has 30 more places. It's the fifth list since 2017. It shows a consistent pattern, a symbolic reinforcement of their claims.
What's been Bharat's official response this time?
Consistent and firm rejection. The Ministry of External Affairs called it baseless, said inventing names doesn't change the reality. Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of Bharat. The timing is also noted coinciding with reports of increased Chinese activity near Tawang and Bharat's own infrastructure push in border areas. It feels like strategic signaling.
What government initiatives are in place to counter these claims and strengthen our position in Arunachal?
Bharat maintains a strong diplomatic stance, always reiterating sovereignty. There's a major focus on border infrastructure development, roads, tunnels, airfields to improve connectivity. The strategic and cultural importance of Tawang Monastery is often highlighted. We deploy specialized forces like the Special Frontier Force, SFF, in these areas, and legislative steps continually assert sovereignty.
For Mainz, what are the key implications of this ongoing cartographic aggression?
It really underscores the challenges of border management, the different perceptions of the line of actual control, LAC. It deepens the strategic mistrust between Bharat and China. Renaming can be seen as information warfare, trying to influence opinion. It complicates diplomacy, especially with disengagement talks stalled. Geopolitically, it's a direct challenge to Bharat's sovereignty.
Militarily.
It demands heightened preparedness along the eastern border. It raises questions under international law about territorial claims. And domestically, it fuels nationalist sentiment and shapes public opinion on China.
What steps can Bharat take going forward?
Continued diplomatic assertiveness is key. Accelerating border infrastructure development is vital. Strategic communication using our own official maps, emphasizing local names, is important to counter their narrative. People-centric development in border villages strengthens our presence, and persistently pushing for the resumption of meaningful boundary talks is essential for any long-term solution.
And prelims pointers on this.
Remember the Chinese name for Arunachal, Xiangnan, the first renaming year, 2017, and maybe the number of places.
Yep.
Definition of LAC, Tong, strategic importance, and the core MEA stance baseless doesn't change reality.
Okay, now let's shift to a tragic incident from Punjab. The hooch tragedy in Amritsar. Can you explain hooch, spurious liquor, and its dangers?
Hooch, or spurious liquor, is illegally made alcohol. The big danger is it often contains methanol, a highly toxic industrial alcohol. Even small amounts of methanol can cause blindness, organ damage, death. Producing and selling it is illegal, violates state excise laws.
And these tragedies happen too often in Bharat.
Sadly, yes. Often linked to poverty, as hooch is much cheaper than legal alcohol. It frequently affects the most vulnerable communities.
And this recent incident in Amritsar saw a terrible loss of life.
Yes, at least 23 deaths reported in Amritsar district around May 13th, 14th. Over a dozen more people fell seriously ill. Areas like Rajasthansi, Tarn Taran were affected. Post-mortems confirmed methanol poisoning. Police have arrested 5 people, including a bootlegger and distillery operator. The Punjab government announced compensation and ordered a judicial inquiry.
What government interventions or policies exist to prevent this?
Punjab has its excise policy, like the 2021 one, meant to curb illegal liquor. But clearly, enforcement is a huge challenge. While there's a Central Excise Act, alcohol regulation is largely a state subject under the Constitution, Article 246. Governments run awareness campaigns. Sometimes state governments set up special task forces for crackdowns.
For Mainz, what are the key aspects of this issue?
It starkly highlights a public health crisis due to poor regulation and enforcement gaps, often linked to corruption. There are deep economic roots poverty driving demand. Often, allegations of political connections protecting the trade emerge. Legal penalties might not be strong enough deterrents.
Social impact.
Disproportionately hits marginalized communities. Undermines trust in administration and law enforcement. Has political fallout. And economically, it hurts the legitimate industry and costs the government tax revenue.
What could be more effective in stopping future tragedies?
Strengthening enforcement is key. Dedicated anti-hooch cells, faster prosecution, sustained community awareness campaigns are needed. Using technology like drones or AI for surveillance might help detect illegal operations. Excise reforms, maybe rationalizing legal alcohol prices while cracking down harder on legal stuff, and encouraging whistleblowers with incentives to report illegal activity.
And prelims points on the hooch tragedy.
Methanol's toxicity. Basic definition of excise policy. Article 246 relevance, state subject. Awareness of past major tragedies. And that illegal liquor trade involves fines and imprisonment.
Okay, moving from that tragedy to a public health concern.
Yeah.
Bird flu confirmed at Gorakhpur Zoo in UP. What exactly is bird flu?
Bird flu, or avian influenza, is a viral infection mainly affecting birds. But some strains, like the concerning H5N1 and H5N8, can sometimes jump to humans. That makes them zoonotic diseases transmissible from animals to humans. This highlights the importance of the One Health approach, recognizing the link between human, animal, and environmental health. International bodies like WHO, FAO push this.
And the H5 strain was confirmed at Gorakhpur Zoo. Was the immediate response?
Yes, confirmed on May 14th after bird deaths there. The UP government acted quickly, temporarily closed all state zoos, ordered testing in nearby areas. They started culling affected birds, sanitizing, strict quarantine. Alerts went out to neighboring states like Bihar and MP, which are on migratory bird routes.
What government measures are generally in place for bird flu outbreaks?
Bharat has a national action plan for avian influenza. Rapid response teams, RRTs, are deployed for containment, safe disposal. There are biosecurity guidelines for poultry farms, zoos. There's a One Health pilot project testing integrated surveillance. And animal quarantine and certification services, AQCS, monitor animal health, especially imports-exports.
What are the broader implications for the Mainz exam?
The biggest worry is zoonotic risk, the potential for a strain to cause a human pandemic. These outbreaks also show gaps in animal disease surveillance. Huge economic impact on poultry farmers due to culling, trade restrictions, ecological disruption for wild birds, waste management challenges with carcass disposal, public health concerns, potential panic, economic hits to tourism if zoos close. And it really underscores the policy need for that One Health framework.
What steps can strengthen our response and prevention?
Expanding integrated surveillance under One Health is key. Better data sharing. Boosting veterinary infrastructure, more labs, mobile units, regular training on quarantine, biosecurity for relevant staff, clear compensation mechanisms for farmers can encourage reporting, and public awareness campaigns to provide accurate info, promote safe practices, dispel myths.
And for prelims on bird flu?
Virus family, Orthomyxoviridae. Key strains, H5N1, H5N8, Gorakhpur incident date, May 14, 2025, One Health proponents, WHO, FAO, OIE, First India case, Maharashtra, 2006.
Right. Finally, let's end on a positive note. Innovation in 2D metals. What are 2D materials? Graphene is the famous one, right?
Exactly. 2D materials are substances just one or a few atoms thick. Electrons are confined to move in 2 dimensions. That's quantum confinement. This gives them extraordinary properties. Graphene, a single layer of carbon, is the best known example. Super strong, conductive, flexible.
And now, ISIC Bengaluru researchers have synthesized 2D bismuth sheets, or bismuthine. What's special about that?
Yes, a big breakthrough. Bismuthine is a 2D form of bismuth. These sheets they made are just 1 atom thick, stable, and show amazing properties. Better conductivity than bulk bismuth, very flexible, heat-resistant. This makes it really promising for next-gen electronics. Think faster transistors, new sensors, maybe even quantum computing components. They use a technique called vapor phase deposition and, crucially, achieved stability at room temperature.
Very cool. And this links to Atmanirbharta in semiconductors.
Absolutely. Innovations like this are exactly what's needed to boost Bharat's efforts towards self-reliance in semiconductor manufacturing and advanced electronics.
What government initiatives support this kind of cutting-edge R&D?
Several key ones. The Semicon India program aims to build the whole semiconductor ecosystem here. The PLI scheme for electronics incentivizes domestic manufacturing. The National Quantum Mission 2023 directly funds research in quantum tech, which includes materials like this. Plus, ongoing funding for premier institutes like ISC, IITs, CSIR labs, and the National Supercomputing Mission providing computational power.
For mains, what are the key considerations around such scientific innovations?
A major challenge is always bridging that gap from lab research to market commercialization tech transfer. Bharat's current import dependence on chips highlights the strategic need for domestic innovation. Funding for deep tech R&D can sometimes lag. Protecting intellectual property, IP, is vital to capture economic benefits. Strategically, successes here boost chip sovereignty goals. Economically, huge potential for Make in India, high-skill jobs.
And scientifically,
It positions Bharat strongly in material science globally. Environmentally, these materials could lead to lower power, more sustainable electronics.
So what steps can help leverage these innovations more effectively?
Strengthening lab-to-market links, innovation hubs, venture capital for deep tech, protecting IP through faster patents, international filings, more international collaboration, better industry-academia synergy, and critically, building a skilled workforce in nanotechnology advanced manufacturing.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive for today. We've covered, well, a huge range of topics relevant to your UPSC preparation, from Bharat-Pakistan relations, the new CJI, to migration, reservations, China's actions, public health issues, and that exciting science news.
Yeah.
Our aim, as always, was not just to report the news, but to help you understand the concepts behind it and why it matters for your mains exam.
Absolutely. It's vital to see how these diverse events connect, how they reflect Bharat's evolving political, social, economic landscape. Developing that holistic understanding is key for UPSC. Keep analyzing, keep connecting them to your syllabus.
Subscribe for daily updates, and please do drop a comment, share your thoughts with us, and definitely join the Telegram channel. The link is in the description to read this news yourself and try a quiz based on our discussion today. Jai Hind.